Our esteemed speakers and guests. I am Kritika, and it is my absolute pleasure and an honor to be your host for the event today. As India celebrates the 5th anniversary of GST implementation, we felt that it's the right time to review, assess, analyze, and discuss the lessons and learnings from the past to determine the way forward. Accordingly, the theme of our inaugural annual GST Summit for this year is Unravelling 5 Years of GST, Unlocking India's Potential. We have with us an impressive list of speakers and an enthralling set of topics that I'm sure will keep us all engaged throughout the day. We have a lot to cover today, and we can't achieve it on time without the successful cooperation of all our guests in helping us to stick to the agenda timelines. Before we start, may I request all our guests to please put your phones on the silent mode. Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Vikesh Dhyani, co-founder and director, Taxo and Oakbridge Publishing, to deliver the welcome note. So.
Distinguished guests, eminent speakers, our colleagues from Taxo, Astrazure and Oakbridge, our partners, sponsors, and our friends from media and the professional community. A very good morning to all of you. I'm Vikesh Dhyani. I'm co-founder of Taxo.online and Oakbridge Publishing, two powerful, high-quality, knowledge-creating companies. These are two knowledge-driven organizations which aspire to help you succeed in your profession. 5 years back, we started Oakbridge Publishing, a specialist publisher of law and tax, and also organized our first GST conclave in 2017. Fast forward to present, we are much bigger, stronger, mightier, collaborating with Astrazure, a leading indirect tax services and solutions firm, to bring to you a fast and innovative GST knowledge solution, Taxo.online. Taxo is our first major digital initiative to transform and revolutionize the way GST professionals consume information and derive knowledge. How do we do that? 3 simple things. We curate high-quality information, organize it smartly, and combine it with the practical knowledge and wisdom based on real-world situations. This distilled wisdom and knowledge helps professionals save tremendous amount of their time and resources. It helps senior executives and partners reduce their team's reliance on them and enables their teams to educate and train themselves better, faster, and cheaper. If you want to learn more about Taxo, please visit our demo desk outside during the breaks, or also register online for a detailed demo on Taxo.online. We have an eclectic mix of speakers and topics, and I would like to take this opportunity to formally welcome all our eminent speakers who will be joining us today, including Fali Nariman sir, who will be joining us virtually over Zoom, Mr. V. Lakshmi Kumaran, who has a keynote address towards the end of the program, Mr. Deepak Jain, CA Atul Kumar Gupta, Mr. Pratik Jain, Mr. Somesh Arora, Mr. Shudipta Bhattacharjee, Mr. Anup Gupta, Mr. Sanjay Sharma, Mr. Sujit Batra, Dr. Rajendra Gupta, Madam Timsi Jaipuria, Mr. Mohammad Salim, Ms. Rohini Agrawal, Ms. Sharanya Lakshmi Kumaran, Mr. Shanky Agrawal, and my colleague, Mr. Sumit Mishra. A lot of effort and hard work has gone in preparing this event after a long time. It's good to see people physically now. We hope to be able to impart all the learnings and enriching knowledge sessions the way we have designed to you all. And we hope that you'll genuinely benefit from all the sessions. I wish you a great time ahead, learning and interacting with the speakers and with your fellow delegates. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikesh. I would now like to invite our first keynote speaker for the day, Mr. Pratik Jain, who will be delivering his address on GST One Nation, One Tax, a Progress Report. Pratik is a partner in Pricewaterhouse India and leads the firm's GST practice in addition to his role as a regional managing partner for North India. Pratik chairs ASSOCHAM's National GST Task Force and also advises on matters related to tax planning, management, dispute resolution, and policy-related issues. He also writes for publications like the Economic Times.
Attendance is a little low because I think Saturday morning a lot of people need to talk about GST, I guess. And there's enough about GST which has been talked about for last, I guess, 15, 20 days. So my name is Pratik. I look after the indirect tax practice for PwC. The good news is that I may not take entire 30 minutes to speak. The bad news is that I may not say anything which you may not already know about, right? But I will try and sort of talk about, GST in general, about since we are completing 5 years, 5 big accomplishment of GST, which perhaps we forget about, 5 areas where we could have done better, and 5 ideas for the future. And somebody was telling me some time back that GST in India is like a rural wedding where the bride has not seen the groom, right? And the bride has been told that groom is very handsome and groom will come in a white horse, will take you and you'll live happily thereafter. And, then the celebration happens, the whole parliament meets and, celebrates, and then the wedding happens. And soon thereafter, the bride realizes that kuch problem hai. There is a problem with the groom and all of that. And bride goes back and says, I can't stay with this guy. I want a divorce. And the family members say that you can't take a divorce, man. I mean, you have to adjust. Like all marriages, you have some good moments, some bad moments, and some dull moments, right? But 5 years of marriage, as a lot of people will tell you who are married, that after 5 years things start stabilizing, right? Your expectations are also low in that sense. So that's the stage where we are in. Look, I mean, GST, a lot of us don't realize that how transformational it was, right? As a tax consultant, and many of you would relate to me, I mean, if you have sort of worked in this space, that our life before GST was very complicated, right? Everything, every issue that we used to deal with was so complicated. Half of the time we were wondering that whether conversion of ice to water is manufactured or not, whether roasting of a papad is manufactured or not, and hence liable to excise duty and so on, right? Every time the truck would move at the checkpost, it will get stopped. Okay, Octroi was there in Mumbai, entry taxes, different laws, it was so difficult to advise our overseas clients because they were saying that there are 28 different countries within one country because every state has different tax laws, different rates, different mechanism, different set of provisions and so on, right? So it's very difficult to do business. So the first thing I think GST has done is to achieve enormous structural simplicity. All the states, one common law, whatever good and bad, but one rate, no check posts. Octroi, somebody was telling me recently that the truck which used to take 7 days to move from one place to another, now takes 4 days to move. And there is so much of additional capacity that you have created in transportation segment, right? So these are transformational stuff, right? So structural simplicity, I think, is the first one which GST has achieved and which we perhaps undermine, the C forms and the F forms and all of that. Every balance sheet that you would sign as a CA, you will see huge amount of contingent liability that C forms not collected. All of that is things of past. Second is tax base. Again, a lot of us don't realize that India was struggling for first 50, 60, 70 years of independence with tax to GDP ratio, right? Our tax collection was not enough to meet with our expenses. Last year, for the first time, I think tax to GDP ratio has touched 11.7%. We have 1.3 crore registered taxpayers in the country. This number before GST came in, if you add service tax and VAT and so on, was perhaps 40 to 45 lakh sort of people, right? So 45 lakh people have to, the tax base has increased to 1.3 crores, which is phenomenal. 89 crore returns have been filed on GST portal since GST started till March 22. So these are phenomenal achievement. Third is Digital India. See, for any successful tax regime, to my mind, you have to have three things, right? Simplicity, stability, and transparency. Right? These are the 3 things of feature of any tax law, any tax regime. One thing which you need to reduce is a physical interface or physical interaction between the taxpayers and the tax administrators. Because more you interact physically, more corruption will be there. I mean, it's a common knowledge that every C-form booklet, there was a rate fixed in different states where you had to pay to get those C-forms and so on. What GST did was that complete elimination of any sort of physical interaction, in-person interaction between taxpayers and tax administrators. Of course, you're doing GST audits, etc. You have to interact physically, and hopefully faceless assessment will come in there as well, just like income tax has come. I think it's a matter of a couple of years that will move in that direction. So, but that's digital India that we say is again a huge achievement. Today, when I talk to my counterparts in other countries, they look at India with such amazement that how did you create the GSTN framework? Okay, where till March 22, 1.3 billion or 1.4 billion IRNs have been generated, which is your invoices. 2.7 billion e-invoices, and so on. So we are talking about some huge numbers here, right? Initially, of course, there were issues in technology, but now I think it's a world-class thing, and later during the conversation, I'll talk about as to what I believe that this data can do. Fourth is cooperative federalism. We have heard a lot about this. See, in a family of four, right, where wife, husband, and two kids, you can't agree on where to order pizza from, right, in today's environment. Now here, there are 28 states and central government are agreeing on everything around GST. In 47 GST council meetings, there are hardly any votes which have happened till now. And these are parties of different political sort of lineage and so on. So everybody coming together and agreeing to GST and agreeing to the framework, agreeing to the changes, again is something which we undermine at times. States have lost their freedom. States have lost their freedom in a big way, right? Yesterday I was looking at this RBI report which talked about few states like Punjab and Rajasthan, etc., where the debt to GDP ratio is very high. So in Punjab it's more than 50%. In UP it is around 34-35%, and Punjab, Rajasthan it is around 39%, and so which should not be more than 20%. The point I'm making is that with this huge debt and GDP ratio, states would have liked some freedom to collect more taxes as and when they wanted. Now they have given up everything. Of course, center has also given up, but states have given up everything, every flexibility that they had to move the tax rates up and down. And this is such a great thing to have happened in the country. But on the flip side, states are now struggling with their finances, right? So after compensation is over, on 30th June this year, now states are demanding that compensation should be increased. My sense is that they would perhaps central government might agree to increase the compensation period by a couple of years, just to kind of get to that relationship with the states. But this cooperative federalism, I think, is a big one. The last one is, in terms of achievement, is the tax rate reduction. There is RBI report which said that before GST came in, the average tax rate was 15.3%. It has come down to 11.12%, right? That means that prices would have expected to fall down in most cases. Now that's a debate which is going on. Government believes that the benefit has not been passed on to the consumers, but I think that market forces would ensure that ultimately the benefit comes to the consumer in an ideal kind of a situation. Now, does it mean, when we talk about accomplishment, does it mean that everything is fine? Obviously not, right? There are areas where we could have done better, right? So maybe I'll just outline some of the areas where I feel we could have done better, and that's where we need to start focusing on. First is the structural imbalance which GST has caused, right? The states which is earlier like states like Chhattisgarh and all of that, Jharkhand, which were rich in minerals, they used to collect CST, central sales tax. Now they can't, right? Because it's a consumption-based tax. From a business standpoint, there are a lot of issues in terms of getting the refunds, getting the input tax credits. The refunds are not allowed. If I have excess input tax credit in my books, the refunds are not allowed for input services under inverted duty structure and so on. So I think that's one area where one needs to look at. From a cash flow perspective, most of the industry, companies who work with, we work with them, they have come back and said that my requirement for cash in GST is huge, Because earlier what used to happen under the erstwhile regime, that you had service tax, which was a common law, right? So it didn't matter in which state you are operating, you would offset your input taxes against your output service tax. Now, for each state, you have a separate central GST balance, separate state GST balance, separate IGST balance. We are now going to the government and saying this is not a good idea. Why do you want to have separate state balances? Why don't you have, at least at a CGST level, have one pool across India, right? And it doesn't matter whether I'm in Maharashtra or Karnataka, you allow me to set off. I mean, they have some concerns that how will it lead to settlement issues, etc. I don't think there's an issue, but that's something which we are working on. There are countries like Australia and Denmark, where the GST, excess GST, you can offset with income tax, for example. And why not? Because income tax is being collected by the same sort of country which is collecting central GST. So time has come to look at, how can you reduce the requirement of cash in the hands of business and leave more cash with the business. Today, for example, if I have to pay something on reverse charge, I can't use my input credit to pay that. So again, I pay something on reverse charge, and again, it starts accumulating my credits. So that's another thing which we need to work on. Third was anti-profiteering, we did talk about. So the idea is always noble, right, on some of these things, that you have to ensure that if there is a reduction of tax rate or you get a credit, you have to pass it on to the customers, right? But the way we have implemented was so shabby, right? I mean, you didn't have the guidelines to implement. We work with, let's say, coffee chains where, these kind of issues have been raised, that, okay, if there is a cappuccino which you're selling at 110 rupees, now you should sell at 109 rupees 50 paisa. Now, who uses currency now in paisa these days? But, there is the appreciation for business nuances is just not there. Now, it was for 2 years. They have extended it till November 22, the whole anti-profiteering regime. And one is now hearing that it might move to Competition Commission of India, right? So it is always a sword hanging on your head when you're doing business. Every time you take a price increase, there might be a risk that somebody can just complain and say, look, they have passed on the GST savings that they were supposed to, sort of not pass on, in a sense that, they have increased the price. And this is a big problem. So anti-profiteering mechanism should go. I mean, in Australia and other places, it was there only for a few months. We have carried it for 5 years, 4 years, and now we are carrying it further. Dispute resolution is a big one. We expected GST to reduce litigation, but the way it has happened, it has, to delight of people like us, though, that it has increased many folds, because different states have different advanced ruling authorities. They are giving their orders at their will, completely contrary to each other, without applying their minds, and so on. And as a business, if I go for advanced ruling in 5 states, in 3 states, the state's saying it's 18%, 2 states saying it's 12%, what do I do? Right? So I don't have a mechanism. Today, there is not even a tribunal which is set up. This is amazing in a country of our size. 5 years from GST, against an order of a commissioner, you have to go to High Court. There is no tribunal in between. And which is unimaginable. Of course, now they have set up in this a group of ministers again to kind of look at that. And I'm not trying to suggest that these issues are not complicated. But these issues, I mean, you have to reduce litigation. What we are also telling the government now is, why don't you come in with some kind of amnesty scheme? The GST people got used to it, 5 years. There were a lot of errors in earlier, etc. Come clean and say, look, no interest, no penalty, you pay taxes and forget about it. Just like, you did it for service tax, etc. for some years back, right? Why don't you do that? And hopefully some of those things will happen. Tax administration is another thing which perhaps we could have handled better. So today what's happening in different states are different, have different methodology. They're asking different information during audits. States were not used to handle service providers earlier because service tax was a central levy. Now they're struggling. They don't understand the sectors. We don't have, in our country of our size, we need to have sector-specific tax administrators. So somebody who is an expert in oil and gas does work only for oil and gas sector. Somebody who's expert in power does work on that, right? Because different industry has different nuances, and you need to understand the issues before you kind of start auditing, etc. Initially, there were some committees which were set up for different sectors, but that's dormant now. It's not working. So we're also going to the government and saying, can you create some at least sector-specific forums for us to interact and and come up with our views, etc. Now, so therefore, now 5 years has gone, and what are the big ideas that one can look at for future, right? When we're looking at GST for the next 5 years, and we have to realize that some of these reforms it evolves over a period of time. It's not something which happens overnight. If you look at European Union, where several years ago GST came in or VAT came in, they're still struggling, right? Malaysia actually took it back. So some of these reforms are not easy for countries to come in, and therefore one has to start looking at that how we can take this GST to the next level. So what are the things that we are at least advocating, and when we go and as industry bodies and chambers and professionals of the government, the first thing we're saying is, and this I touched upon, is that look at reducing your input tax accumulation, right? So, you give more cash in the hands of business. We talked about one central GST pool, some central IGST pool, and so on. We also gave an idea, maybe it's a little radical, to say that can you convert if suppose as a business I have 200 crores of accumulated input taxes, can you allow me to convert that into a tradable script? Okay, allow me to sell it in the market at a discount. So let's say if I have, and you do the audit, etc., and allow me to sell it in the market. Let's say 100 rupees, I sell it 98, so government gets 2 rupees in that sense. You allow it to be traded, right, freely, and that will unlock your, excess input tax credit that you have. Second thing is there is a lot of scope on liberalization or simplifying the tax law. I talked about, simplicity, transparency, and stability. The tax law is not simple. So, for instance, one thing which they have in their mind, they're thinking that any expense that you're incurring on an employee should not be allowed as an input credit, which I think is from a philosophical perspective, it is a very flawed argument, right? Because for income tax purposes, I get the deduction. So, for example, if I have a cafeteria where people come, my employees come and have lunch, etc., and I incur that expense, why should I not be allowed to take deduction? If I'm taking a personal insurance for my employees, why should I not be allowed to take a deduction? If I am constructing an office and I'm incurring GST on that, why should I not be allowed to take a deduction of that expense that I'm using on construction against my GST on rent, right? I should be allowed, ideally. But in their mind, they're thinking, no, there'll be abuse of this provision and so on. Recently, when I met with the government, I suggested that if you feel that, let's say, a 2% or 3% of overall input, taxes that I'm paying is not eligible, right? By all means, give an option to the industry to say you can claim only 97%. Because I don't want as a company to go over 50,000 invoices to the tax officer, and for each invoice he looks at and says, this credit is allowed, this is not allowed, because this is for personal consumption, this is for business consumption. You see, in recent, a lot of people missed this perhaps on this GST Council meeting. For the first time, government has taxed residential renting. Before that, residential renting was not taxed. Now today, if I have an apartment, I give it to a company for use by their expats or whatever senior management, and I am above the threshold, I have to pay GST now, right? Now I pay GST, no problem with that. That's the government can collect that. But the issue is, will that company be able to claim an offset of this 18% which I have charged? Because if I'm using something for personal consumption, it's not allowed. Now, used by a company for their senior management or with their people who are staying there, is it a personal consumption or it's a business expenditure? That's an issue. So, so we have given some ideas. Let's see what happens. Tax administration needs to be revamped completely. Again, a lot of issues. They're dealing with this by circulars and guidance notes, etc. But things like, now states have started asking things like state-wise trial balance and state-wise P&L. Now, no company maintains state-wise profit and loss account. I mean, of course, we have a trading account where sales and purchases, but they're saying that even the salary cost at the head office, you allocate. to different. There are issues which say, where under GST, different states are treated as different entities, right? So if I have an office in Maharashtra, I will be treated as a different entity. If I have a office in Delhi, it's a different entity. And I'm required to do a cross charge of expenses from one place to another. So my head office is in Mumbai, and my senior management is sitting there. Let's say my CEO, CFO, etc., my head of HR. They are requiring me to do a cross charge because they're saying this office, Mumbai office, is providing a service to Delhi office, which in concept itself looks a little absurd. But then they're saying that, by the way, when you're doing a cross charge, you should also add the salary of the CEOs and salary of CFOs as well. And any employee is not an employee of a Mumbai office or a Delhi office. They're an employee of the company, right? So some of these things we are trying to kind of look at, and because they don't have a specialized tax administrators, there is a problem because they don't understand sectors. How does it work? The fourth point which we are telling the government is that try and find ways to curb the tax evasion, right? While we have still a tax to GDP ratio which has improved, there is a huge amount of tax evasion which is happening. If you go to Gafa market or whatever, furniture market, Kirti Nagar, etc., the guy will ask, okay, do you want a bill, sir? You don't want a bill. You want a bill, then 18% will be extra, right? And as a consumer, you will be tempted to say, bill mat do. How does it matter for me? Because I don't get a credit, right? Now, this is a mindset issue, but the more important thing is that ultimately when you realize whether if you insist on the bill or the overall price, in most cases, doesn't even change. Right, because he would charge 18%, but overall the price will be inclusive of everything. If it doesn't give you a bill, that 18% he is pocketing. That's how it happens, right? You don't get a benefit of that as a consumer. Now, in some countries like Czech Republic and Romania and other places, what they've done is they've started some kind of a lottery scheme to say, you get a receipt, you report that into a government portal or whatever, right? And if the GST number is not correct, because GST number has to be given, right? So a lot of cases it's a fake GST number, etc. Then you can get an award or reward or whatever. You can get a refund of 20-30%. So the mindset issue needs to be addressed, because we as Indians, we would be tempted to do something where we are getting back something, right? So, and unless the consumer, because huge amount of evasion is in a B2C segment. B2B segment mein to theek hai, because you get a credit, etc. It is fine, one business to another business. Evasion is there, but it is organized evasion, like a fake invoicing racket, etc. But B2C is very rampant, because you can't connect, you can't find out in most cases. So that's one thing. The last point we are making is that how you can use technology to take this to the next level. The kind of data that the government has today, right? Invoice level data from each product, where the product is moving from, where it is going to, at what price, how much time does it take for a truck to take because they have e-way bill data and so on. It's so rich that the more you think about it, the more you think about the potential of this information that they have. I was telling the GST and CEO recently that, sir, you should start monetizing this data now. Of course, you have to mask that data. You can't sort of say that this company is doing this. But if you give this information that, let's say, for example, a particular kind of raw material, where it is going from and how much of that commodity is getting consumed in which state. If I'm setting up a factory, that's such a valuable information for me. Today you have information that what kind of medicine is going to what, from which state to which state, and you can figure out that what kind of maybe problem and diseases, etc. are there concentrated on a particular thing, right? There's enormous amount of potential in integrating income tax and GST together. Today, for example, in the GST, you have this functionality that you can click a button and find out whether vendors have filed the returns or not. If you extend this to income tax, today under income tax, you have a provision that if you have not filed the return, you have to deduct TDS at a higher rate. But that information is not provided in the GST portal. It's very easily, it can be provided, because GST registration is PAN number based, right? You can use blockchain, you can use, design thinking and all of that. So the kind of infrastructure we have created, the kind of data that we have, there is huge potential that we have. So I'm almost done with my time. So I'll just try and sort of summarize, and in our particularly consulting sort of language, if people would ask me any question which I don't know anything about, I just say that lot has been done, but lot still needs to be done, which is a very safe way of putting it. But on a more serious note, I think what we have achieved as a country is phenomenal. I think we undermine our achievement at times. It's something which is unimaginable. I mean, till the time GST happened, I did not believe that it could happen. Right on 30th of June, 2017, when it was happening, it was almost like a dream. But there is of course a lot of work to be done, and the structural simplicity that we have got is phenomenal. And now we all need to work with the government and with all the stakeholders, and perhaps industry has to sort of play a more active role in sort of taking this GST to the next level. So thank you very much for listening, and back to your host. Thank you.
May I now request Manoj sir to please present a memento to Pratik.